Hey, I'm Sarah. Before I get into the heart of my story, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more about how one night changed everything for me in ways I never expected. Thanks for tuning in. The evening was supposed to be a celebration. Mrs. Whitmore had opened her grand home for a family dinner, and the setting was nothing short of elegant. Crystal chandeliers lit up the room, casting a soft glow over the gleaming china. It felt perfect. I was excited to announce my promotion, a milestone I had worked hard for in my marketing career. I remember adjusting my dress, taking a deep breath, and mentally preparing for the moment. I expected smiles, congratulations, and maybe even a toast. As the appetizers were served, I leaned toward Tom, my husband, and whispered, "I have some great news." He nodded, giving me the encouragement I needed. Smiling, I turned to the family and said, "I've been promoted to Senior Marketing Director." But instead of the applause I anticipated, the room fell into a heavy silence. Mrs. Whitmore's expression tightened, her eyes narrowing, lips pressed into a thin line. Leaning toward Tom, but loud enough for me to hear, she muttered, "Is this what we raised him for? To be overshadowed by his wife's career?" Tom, usually my biggest supporter, suddenly seemed to shrink under his mother's glare. The smile faded from his face, and I felt his hand pull away from mine beneath the table. Trying to salvage the moment, I added, "It's an amazing opportunity for us, Tom. The raise is substantial." But Mrs. Whitmore didn't let it go. Her voice, sharp and disapproving, cut through the air. "What about starting a family, Sarah? Do you think a paycheck can replace the joy of children?" Tom, surprisingly, joined in, his voice colder than I had ever heard. "Yeah, Sarah, when are you planning to settle down? This career isn't everything." The words stung deeply, but more than that, his sudden shift felt like a betrayal. "I thought you were proud of me," I said softly, my voice barely holding back the hurt. The conversation shifted after that, but the tension hung thick over the table, much like the aroma of the pot roast being served. Tom barely looked at me, and with each passing minute, his demeanor grew more distant, mirroring the judgment in his mother's eyes. Just as dessert was being served, Tom stood abruptly, tossing his napkin onto the table. "You need to know your place, Sarah. You're my wife, not my competitor," he said, his voice booming. My heart pounded as I rose to my feet. "Being your wife doesn't mean I should give up my dreams, Tom. I deserve respect, not this." In a moment that still haunts me, Tom's hand came down, striking me across the face. The sound, sharp, loud, echoed through the room, freezing everyone in place. I stood there, hand trembling against my cheek, as the pain spread across my face and deeper into my heart. Without saying a word, I turned and walked away. The screech of my chair against the floor seemed to scream louder than anything anyone could have said. My heels clicked against the cold marble as I headed toward the front door. I didn't look back as I grabbed my purse and stepped out into the crisp night air. The soft click of the door behind me was the end of one chapter, and the beginning of something I couldn't yet fully understand. In that instant, I knew my marriage was over. I had to leave, to find a place where ambition wasn't something to be ashamed of. I needed space to breathe, to rediscover who I was after being lost in someone else's shadow for too long. As I drove away, the house slowly disappearing in the rearview mirror, I was flooded with both fear and relief. I was truly alone, but for the first time in ages, I felt a flicker of something fierce and undeniable: freedom. This was the start of a new chapter, and I was ready to embrace wherever it would take me. The next morning, sunlight streamed into my small apartment, and waking up felt like stepping into a new life. The events of the night before were both distant and raw, lingering at the edges of my mind. My phone buzzed relentlessly with messages of concern and confusion from friends who'd already heard whispers of what had happened. I ignored them, focusing on the only thing that mattered right now. The first call I made was to a highly recommended divorce attorney. "I need to file for divorce," I said, the words coming out more firmly than I expected. "It's urgent." "Understood," came the calm reply. "I'll prepare the initial paperwork. Can you come in this afternoon to discuss the details?" "Yes, I'll be there." Hanging up, a small surge of victory ran through me. There was no turning back now. At work, I tried to maintain an air of normalcy, but my mind was scattered. My boss, Mr. Daniels, noticed. "Is everything all right, Sarah?" "I'm handling some personal matters, but I can manage," I replied. "Thank you. If you need some time off." "No, I'd prefer to stay busy, honestly." He gave a nod of understanding. "Just let me know if you need anything." Grateful for his support, I threw myself into the day's tasks. The familiar routine was comforting, and my colleagues' kindness made it easier to breathe, even amid the chaos of my unraveling personal life. Around midday, Jenna, one of my closest work friends, stopped by my desk. "I heard about last night. Sarah, are you okay?" "It's been tough, but I'll get through it," I said, offering a small smile. You're stronger than you know. And if you ever need to crash at my place or just talk, my door's always open. Thanks, Jenna. I really appreciate that. Drinks after work? My treat, she added with a wink, trying to lighten the mood. Later that evening, over drinks, Jenna and I talked about everything. Despite the turmoil brewing in my life, the laughter and sense of normalcy were a welcome relief, even if only for a few hours. When I got back to my apartment, I checked my phone. Multiple missed calls from Tom. I hesitated for a moment, wondering whether I should call him back, but I decided against it. Instead, I sent a text. I've filed for divorce. Please respect my space during this time. His response came instantly, laced with desperation. Can we talk about this, please, Sarah? I didn't mean. I replied, firm but final. I need space. Tom, good night. As I put down my phone, a storm of emotions churned within me, sadness, relief, anger, and, most of all, determination. I was on the path to freedom now. I glanced around my modest yet comforting apartment, feeling a deep sense of calm settle over me. This space was mine, my sanctuary. No one here could hurt me. I thought about Tom and how his choices, guided by his mother's toxic influence, had led him down this path. He had pushed away the one person who had always been by his side. It was tragic, really, how he had allowed himself to be consumed by misguided pride, but that was no longer my burden to carry. Lying in bed that night, I realized something profound. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was stepping into a phase of life where I could truly begin to live. Tomorrow, I would be stronger, and the day after, even more so. This was the start of something new, and I was ready for it. As my career continued to ascend, I found myself deeply engaged in larger, more impactful marketing campaigns. My network grew, and I started connecting with industry leaders, hosting webinars, and leading workshops that showcased not only my expertise but also my growing reputation as a leader. One busy Monday morning, as I reviewed campaign proposals, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Lisa, a well-known figure in the industry. Sarah, I've heard a bit about what's been going on in your personal life. I'm really sorry you had to go through that, she said, her voice both sympathetic and professional. Thank you, Lisa. It's been a challenge, but I'm getting through it, I responded, keeping my tone steady. Actually, I've been thinking, there's an opening for a keynote speaker at a conference next month. The theme is resilience and leadership, and I think your story, both professional and personal, could really inspire others. What do you say? The offer took me by surprise. It was an opportunity I hadn't expected, but one that seemed to fit perfectly with where I was headed. I couldn't pass up the opportunity. I'd be honored. Lisa, thank you, I said, knowing this was a pivotal moment for my career. As my reputation soared, rumors about Tom began to circulate. It wasn't long before those whispers reached the ears of people who had once respected him. During a routine industry meetup, I overheard fragments of conversation about him. He's looking for work again, one executive muttered under his breath. After what he did to Sarah, no one's going to hire him, the other replied, shaking his head. While my career thrived, Tom found himself struggling, trapped in the consequences of his actions. He reached out to me several times, hoping to mend his tarnished reputation. One afternoon, I received a text from him. Can we meet? I need your help. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him for coffee. Sarah, I'm sorry, I was wrong, Tom began, his voice low and filled with regret. I've lost everything. I can't find a job, and it feels like every door is closed. I looked at him, a familiar yet distant figure. Tom, I'm not here to fix the past. You made your choices, and now you're living with the consequences. But you could talk to people, tell them I've changed, he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. I shook my head gently. It's not just my story anymore, Tom. The professional community talks, and they know what happened. You can't undo the choices you made by asking for a favor. As I left the cafe, I felt a mix of pity and resolve. Tom was facing a hard lesson about the lasting impact of his actions, and no one could spare him from that. Back at work, I poured myself into my projects with renewed energy. What had once felt like personal trials were now shaping my professional success. It was a bittersweet realization, how hardship could lead to triumph, but I knew I was on the right path, one built on my values and the future I wanted to create. When my divorce was finalized, it felt like I could finally exhale after holding my breath for far too long. This new chapter wasn't just about moving on, it was about channeling everything I'd been through to fuel my future. At work, my responsibilities grew, and I launched a mentorship program for young women in marketing, inspired by my journey of overcoming obstacles. During one mentorship session, I met Ava, an ambitious intern who reminded me of myself at her age. One day, during a meeting, she looked at me with curiosity in her eyes and her notebook poised. Sarah, how do you handle criticism? especially when people doubt whether you belong. I smiled, feeling a wave of recognition. You listen, you learn, and then you let your work speak for itself. Don't let anyone's doubt define your reality. Use it as fuel to push harder. Ava nodded thoughtfully, jotting down notes. Watching her, I realized that this, mentoring others, sharing what I'd learned, was a part of my success I hadn't anticipated but had come to cherish. And what if it feels impossible? She asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Then you lean on those around you, I said, meeting her eyes. Build a strong network, seek mentors, and never be afraid to ask for help. No one does this alone. We're always stronger together. The mentorship program was just one part of my ever-expanding life. My social circle grew as well, and I was frequently invited to speak at industry events and gatherings, sharing not only my professional expertise but also my personal journey. At one such event, a networking dinner for top marketing professionals, I was approached by Derek, an old colleague who had heard about my recent successes. Sarah, I have to say, your talk was incredible. How do you keep pushing forward after all that's happened? Derek asked, admiration evident in his tone. It's about not letting the past dictate where you're headed, I replied, accepting his praise with a smile. Every challenge teaches you something, and you just keep moving forward. The conversation quickly shifted to ideas for collaboration, and Derek posed an intriguing suggestion. Have you ever thought about writing a book? Your story could inspire so many people. The idea caught me off guard but excited me. By the end of the evening, I had exchanged contact information with a publisher in attendance. It was clear that every connection, every conversation, was opening new doors for me, a sign of how far I'd come. As my confidence grew, so did the scope of my career. I hosted workshops, led ambitious marketing campaigns, and became a sought-after voice on resilience and empowerment. Each speaking engagement and workshop felt like I was sharing pieces of my journey, transforming my past struggles into lessons for others. In many ways, it was healing. One evening, after a whirlwind day of back-to-back events, I lay in bed reflecting on how far I had come. I was no longer the woman quietly enduring at a family dinner, silenced by fear and shame. Now, I was a leader, a mentor, and a survivor, someone who had turned trials into triumphs. This wasn't just a new beginning, it was the continuation of a journey I was proud to claim as my own. Months passed, and the echoes of my past with Tom had faded into little more than a distant memory, overshadowed by the vibrant life I was leading. But one afternoon, over coffee with a mutual friend, Melissa, those old memories resurfaced. Sarah, I wasn't sure how to bring this up, Melissa began cautiously, but Tom's been asking about you. He's really struggling, says he regrets everything. I took a thoughtful sip of my coffee, processing Melissa's words. Regret often comes when people face the consequences of their actions, I said calmly. He wants to talk, maybe apologize. He seems genuinely sincere, Sarah. Melissa, I appreciate you letting me know, but that chapter of my life is closed. I've moved on, I said firmly. Melissa nodded, recognizing the finality in my voice. We shifted the conversation, leaving Tom's regrets where they belonged, in the past. Despite Tom's repeated messages and calls, I remained resolute in my decision to maintain my distance. My silence wasn't out of bitterness but out of a necessity to preserve my well-being. My journey had taught me the crucial importance of boundaries and self-respect. In the months that followed, my professional life continued to flourish. I spoke at major conferences, led groundbreaking marketing campaigns, and watched my mentorship program thrive. The impact of my work was both tangible and deeply fulfilling. My story, shared through various platforms and workshops, became a source of inspiration for many facing their own struggles. One evening, as I reflected on the past year, I recognized the depth of my transformation. I hadn't merely survived, I had thrived, building a life full of success and meaning. The knowledge that Tom was out there regretting his choices didn't bring me satisfaction. Instead, it served as a somber reminder of the consequences of undermining and disrespecting others. Closing my journal, filled with plans and reflections, I felt a profound sense of peace. My journey with Tom had sparked a path of empowerment and achievement. My triumph wasn't in his downfall but in my rise, in turning pain into strength, and in living a life defined by my values and vision. As we wrap up this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Sarah was right to cut Tom out of her life completely? Share your perspectives below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.